do is click record. A couple of things about the recording. First of all, welcome to the Peralta Community College Online Equity Conference today. We are excited that you're here. My name is Inger Stark, and I am one of the members of the Peralta Online Equity team and part of the team that originated the Peralta Online Equity rubric, which sort of was the centerpiece that launched our whole initiative. I'm a sociology faculty member at Laney College, which is one of the 4 schools, and I'm super excited to be here today. A couple of logistics for you. I have the captions turned on, and we are recording today. Once the sessions are finished, we download the recordings, we edit the transcriptions before we put the session recordings up online. So that means there will be probably a delay of anywhere from a week to 10 days because we have to do that personally, go through each of them. If you want your transcriptions turned on or off, you just click the live transcript button that's at the bottom of your Zoom window. If they're distracting, you can turn them off. If you like them, you can, I believe the default is to have them on. I also wanted to let you know that we encourage you to do lots of chit-chatting in the chat. Frankie and I have chatted this morning. She said that's great. I'll keep an eye there for logistics, things like that. I am not the expert on the topic, but can feed questions to Frankie if she would like them. And I think now that we're right past 8, I'm going to turn, because our presentations are short, I'm going to turn the mic right over to Frankie Fink for her amazing session on preparing and supporting first-generation students, both before and after they go to college. Frankie, welcome to the online conference, and on your mark, get set, go.
Thank you, everyone from all across the globe, as I saw on the list of people. I know this will be recorded, so some of those other people from around the globe can download this later. So we are excited to be here to present about first-generation students. This is something that's near and dear to us because we serve 4 campuses that deal with primarily first-generation students. And so we've been working to figure out ways that we can support them. So I'm Frankie, and my co-presenter is Jason. I always make Jason help me with the technology stuff. And so anytime I'm going to do a presentation, I say, Jason, would you like to do a presentation? And he's okay. He doesn't really have a choice. He helps me. But we both teach English at Vance-Granville Community College in Henderson, North Carolina. It's a small, do we want to say city? Town? City town in North Carolina. So we are excited to be here today to talk to you about first-generation students. Our purpose, again, is to talk about first-generation students, supporting them before they get to us and also after. Jason, in particular, has been working on with our accreditation process and how we can support first-generation students in our English courses. That's something that we will be working on 10 years. So we hope to make some progress in that area. Okay, so we first started out looking at a study done at the University of South Carolina by Laura Smith, and we looked at some parents that she talked about in particular. And there are 3 different types of first-generation parents who, of course, have students who are coming into colleges. And there's the handholder, and some of you may have had some dealings with that type of parent. I know that I have, I know that Jason has, and this particular parent will call you, will try to come to your office and find out how their students are performing. And as you know, with FERPA, we're not allowed to give grades, to give progress without that student signing some kind of document. That parent wants to be involved in every aspect of that student's progress, and sometimes we'll even do some of that student's work. We have had instances where that has happened. Okay, the next parent is the unavailable parent. And that's the parent who from K-12 all the way up through the university or college experience is not available. And as I will share with you in a few moments, I'm a first generation student myself, and both of my parents were unavailable parents. So I had to learn to navigate both the K-12 process as well as the university process. Those parents make it difficult for any student to be successful. Okay. The next parent is, of course, the happy medium. And those parents support their students in K-12 and the university in the most effective way. And I like to think that I'm that kind of parent for my own children. I have a son who I supported him in K-12 and gave him the kind of resources that he needed to be successful when he transferred to the university. And actually, I made him come to the community college first, where I teach, because I thought that was the best option for him. And then he transferred to the university and college transfer program. And I feel sure that I'm that parent. And so ideally, most parents of first generation students are the happy medium, but it can be difficult, especially if you're the first generation parent. Some of them want to be the hand holders because they feel like, because they didn't have that kind of support, that they want to be so involved so that their students have what they didn't have. So that these will be taught, we will be talking about some of these kinds of parents as we go throughout this presentation. Okay, so first we're going to talk about my own experience as a first generation student, because it affects my, I think my goals as an instructor and how I interact with my own first generation students. So this is my family. This is my mother. And this is me with a little crocheted poncho. And if some of you are my age, then you recognize, I'm sure, these little ponchos that were in vogue. So first we're going to talk about my mother. My mother was one of those women who did not have a high school education. She did not graduate from high school. She finished the 10th grade. And she was not very involved in our schooling because she didn't really know what to do. My father left early, left her as a single mother. Because she didn't have an education. She found herself having to go and work 2 minimum wage jobs. She worked from 6 o'clock in the morning at a restaurant in the afternoon, because she could sew anything from scratch. She worked at a sewing factory from 3 until 11 o'clock at night. And so at that point, I was, and when I explain some things are kind of fuzzy in my mind because of the trauma that we experienced. So there were a lot of times during this time period that I took care of my younger sister. And and most people know, if you are uneducated and you are living in poverty and you are trying to work minimum wage jobs, it's not enough to support a family. And so one of the things, as you will find, most people know, when you are living in dire poverty, you are exposed to drugs, violence, crime, and of course, those were the typical things that we experienced. We just couldn't escape it. My mother was in a very violent relationship with her husband. We experienced that. That was something that on a regular basis we saw. We lived in extreme poverty, to the point that, and I tell this story with our students when we're reading an essay in English 111 by Jonathan Kozol about homelessness. My mother, even though she worked 2 jobs and she did her best, we just, we didn't have food. We didn't have enough money for her to buy clothes. We often did not have the money for her to buy things like shampoo, soap, washing detergent to wash our clothes. And when she was at work, when it was time to get myself and my sister up in the morning, get us ready for school, our clothes smelled so badly that, sometimes, hopefully, if we had some powder, I would try to sprinkle some powder on our clothes. So hopefully it would eliminate some of the smell before we went to school. But if you had, 2 pairs, I remember at one point I had in particular 2 outfits to wear to school. And at this one particular time, I was in 7th grade and I had 2 outfits. You couldn't really hide that I couldn't really hide that I had only 2 outfits, because one pair of the pants, I don't even know where they came from, but one pair of the pants was a light pink pair. So if you're going, back and forth between a light pink pair of pants and a dark pair of pants, people are going to notice that that's all you have. And also because you don't have toiletries and you don't have anything to wash your clothes in, you smell. And so children made fun of us. And so that was a regular occurrence for us. Additionally, we lived, because my mother couldn't afford anything other than just the basic minimums, she somehow managed to, I don't even know, get a loan for some kind of trailer that was in, what people called us was in this white trash trailer hood where really poor people live. And because she was only making minimum wage, apparently she could not make the payments on the trailer. And I can remember, and this is, a story that I share in both Jason's and my classes when we read the story on homelessness by Jonathan Kozol. I can remember my sister and I came home one day from school. The school bus drove up, and kids had already been making fun of us on a regular basis because this trailer park, it's the typical really poor, rundown trailer park that kids made fun of us about. You can envision it. And so we would get off the bus and kids are saying, giggling, making fun of us. But this one particular day, we get off the bus. Well, we're getting ready to get off the bus and we pull up and our trailer isn't there. And all I see, and I'm older, I'm older than my sister by 3.5 years. And so I was responsible for taking care of her. And I was at this time 6th grade, and she was maybe 2nd grade. I can't remember the exact times, like I said, because of trauma. But we're pulling up, the trailer is not there. All I see are the concrete steps in front of the trailer. And I look at the bus driver, and she looks at me, and I'm thinking, what do I do? But I'm a kid, and I'm looking at this adult, and she says to me, I don't know what to tell you to do, but I have to go and let these other kids off. So you just got to get off. And so I take my sister, and we go and we sit on these concrete steps. It's, right after school. It's like 3 o'clock after school. And we go and sit on the concrete steps. We didn't have cell phones then. So I couldn't call my mother at work. She doesn't get home from work until 11 o'clock at night. We sit there, it gets dark. Finally, a neighbor lets us come and sit in her trailer until my mom gets home. And we, needless to say, were homeless after that for a while. We finally go back and forth between family members' homes. And that's the kind of life that we had to live with my mother. She was extremely poor. Okay. So you have these students who are coming in to our colleges and universities who have experienced these kinds of programs, these kinds of lives. And so we need to be aware of this when they come in, and not assume that when they do come in, that they are prepared for college life and that they have the skills to succeed. So we looked at one particular program, the TRIO Opportunity Scholars Programs, and you may be familiar with this. This is something that the federal government funds. And so one of the things that they do, and they've set this up for parents, is so in the beginning, now this has to be something that one of the two parents that we talked about would be involved in. My parent, my mother would not have been involved in something like this. So it wouldn't have benefited someone like me or students like me. So parents come in, they meet the students' advisors. This is before they go and start their first semester. They get familiar with the advisors and they help them, okay? The students move in early so that they have access to everything that they need. They're able to meet with their own advisors as well, other students, other professors, okay? They're able to, the parents are able to participate in role-playing exercises. One of the ones that I think is extremely important in this is what happens if your student calls home and says, I failed a test and I just don't think I can do this and I'm ready to come home. So what do you say as a parent to your student? Do you say, because you haven't gone through this, do you just say, all right, just come home? You're right. Maybe you aren't prepared for this. Maybe you do just need to come home and maybe get a job, as, I don't know, working out in McDonald's or somewhere. Okay, next. And then the parents throughout the program maintain relationships with students' advisors. And this is extremely important because as they're doing this, there's all kinds of support available for the parents and the students. And then what happens is we know that the students are more successful, okay? And as a result of this, we know that the first to second year retention rate is that there's a 95% retention rate. And this can be a problem, we know. If you work in higher ed, we know that this is an issue, first or second year retention rate. So something like this program can be extremely important. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what happened with me, and then we'll talk about another student at another university and how it affected her. So in K-12 and how I handled what my mother was going through. Now, I was fortunate enough, and I was I did very well in school. So any kind of testing that I did, 98, 99, 100% percentile. So I was placed in all these AG courses. It was extremely easy for me to do well in school, even though I didn't have support. And so there were things that were going on in school that my parents couldn't help me with. So one example I would give you is that for my 4th grade math classes, they would go to the high school and get my math textbooks and my math homework for the day. And they would bring those to me. I would do all of my work, and then they would send those back to the high school. They would grade them, send them back. None of those were ever sent home or was ever sent home. And that's because, now I'm looking back, they knew that my parents couldn't help me with that, and they weren't going to help me with that. During that time period as well, because of all of the things that I was doing on my own in the classroom, they approached my mother and asked her at the end of my 4th grade year if they could move me ahead 2 grades. And I remember just crying and breaking down and begging my mother not to do that to me, because in the background there's so much trauma going on, and to try to move me ahead and add all of this distress onto me as well, I just knew I could not handle that. I'm going from a 4th grader to a 7th grader, and there was no way. So I talked my mother out of doing that to me. The other thing that I wanted to mention, none of these teachers, nobody at school was reaching out to my family to ask what kind of support they could give to help me be even more successful. So there were, a couple other incidents that I can tell you about. And, I was in this AG program, and it was 5th grade, and we had to do something like this commercial. We had to design this wonderful commercial. My teacher assigned me the toothpaste commercial. And so I had to bring in this box of toothpaste and write this elaborate commercial and perform it in front of the class. We couldn't even afford anything to eat. We didn't have shampoo. We didn't have toothpaste. So I couldn't bring any toothpaste in. And my teacher didn't think to say to me, "Frankie, do you need me to bring some toothpaste in for you?" That was a humiliating experience to me. One other event that I'll just tell you about. During this time period as well, from 7th to 8th grade, I was always excelling, but in 7th and 8th grade, I won the school county spelling bees, and then I went and won the both county spelling bees that year, and went to the regionals. I didn't have any clothes to wear. And I was so embarrassed because I wasn't going to have anything. My mother at that point was so completely uninvolved. I don't even know where she was at that point. I was living with my grandmother. And so I asked the teacher who was going to be taking me to the spelling bee, because my parents weren't going to be, if she would buy me a dress to wear. And she did. But additionally, no one helped me study. No one from the school helped me study for these spelling bees. I would sit at home with a dictionary and study my words. And I just think back, what if somebody had taken the time to reach out to me and help me study? Nobody did that. So K through 12, nobody took the opportunity to help me study, even though I had the ability to succeed. And so I wanted to share those things because we have to reach those first generation students before they go to college, way before they go to college. Okay, so you ready to move next?
Do you want to talk about quitting?
Okay, so this is the other thing. So when I got to, I did go to NC State, and NC State is the largest university in North Carolina. And I got there, and I had obviously the intellectual ability to pass courses, to do very well. When I did finish or go back, I made Dean's List all the time. But when I first got there, so extremely overwhelmed because I didn't have the language of college. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to see. I didn't know how to get financial aid. I didn't know how to register for classes. I didn't know how to ask professors what I need. I didn't know how to do anything. And my counselors in high school didn't really take the opportunity to explain that to me either. So I went into NC State blindly. I was on my own. NC State has 44,000 students, and I didn't know where the offices were for any of these. And so I can remember just feeling so anxious, sometimes crying, and I had to work because obviously I'm extremely poor. I worked 3 jobs, 1 full-time and 2 part-time jobs. And so I'm trying to navigate all of this. The second semester, I said, I can't do it anymore. And I quit. I went home, went back home and lived with my mother. She was back at that time. I went back home and lived with my mother. And that was that. It was the most familiar thing to me. And then after a year of working in restaurants and being in that cycle of poverty, I said, I can't do this. I worked too hard in K-12 and managed to do that. I've got to figure it out. And I'll have to go back and figure it out by myself. Now, what I want to point out here is that the difference in my doing that and other students doing that is that I had the academic side of being able to do that. If you are struggling with school, that's not always as easy for you. So I knew I could go, I knew intellectually I could go into school and do very well. But if you don't have that ability and you know you're going to need all of this extra tutoring, you're going to need, you know, a ton of wraparound services, that's going to be a problem. So we have to think outside the box for that as well. Okay. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about Aaliyah's story too. And at the University of Massachusetts, they talk about, they did a study, and what we know is that nearly a third of undergrad students in the United States are first generation students. I was one of those. Aaliyah, her story is interesting, and they put her story on the website. So if you're interested in going looking at her story, but what she talks about is interesting as well, because she talks about how her family they don't really understand why she even wants to go to college. And she's not alone in that process. They don't understand, why doesn't she, just want to stay home? And college is not for everybody. They feel like you can get a good job without going to college. And so she's having to fight that with her family. And so they're not really involved for her as well. Additionally, because of that, she's starting to doubt how she feels pursuing a degree, because she doesn't have this support at home. This support at home by your parents is so extremely important. And then if you come to the university and first generation students are supported, it can be extremely detrimental to the success of students. The other thing is finances. So if you do not have access to finances, you don't know how to navigate financial aid, you do not have even just extra support to do even little things, like you want to go to McDonald's with your friends. That can be stressful as well. And I'm just gonna share one little thing. I was doing my student teaching and my professor said to me, you can't work while you're doing your student teaching. And I said, you don't understand. I don't have a choice. And she said to me, Frankie, you can't handle both, and you're just gonna not have to buy some clothes or something while you do that. And I realized at that point she just completely didn't get it. So I didn't say anything else about it the rest of the time, and I just taught while I did my student teaching, but she did not get it. And so if you have those kind of professors who are not willing to work with first generation students, it can be overwhelming for students like Aaliyah. All right. So the deficit mindset, this is something that we really have to get away from when we're dealing with our first generation students. And so Wiliam Durden has written about this. He's done a study about this, and he talks about in his study an asset perspective on first generation students. And in this, he talks about vocabulary, making sure we don't use vocabulary with our first generation students that makes them feel like we don't believe that they are capable of succeeding. The second thing that he talks about is that our accommodations are not so, I guess, so overwhelming that they feel like in my case, a lot of my colleagues say I'm babying my students, and I'm trying to get away from that. But that they don't always do what they need to do because they get in this cycle. So we don't want the accommodations to be too much. We want to give them wraparound services so that they're successful, but we don't want the accommodations to be too much. Okay, and then we still want to make sure that the expectations are high as they are for our other students. We don't want to lower our expectations for our first generation students. And sometimes some people will feel, because we're first generation students, because we're poor, that because of the families that we come from, because maybe we come from areas where there are drugs, where there's violence, where there's crime, that we aren't capable of doing as well as other students who haven't come from those areas. And we want to make sure our students know that that's not the case at all. Okay. Now, overcoming the deficit. So overcoming the deficit, how do we do that? All right. So this is where it gets important. And we have some, I think some challenges for everyone. All right. So the first would be, how do we help our students? All right. In the classroom, at the collegiate level, and also at the state and federal level. So in the classroom, I think this first one, and there's a lot of research on this. And so this can go from the K-12 level and also up to the collegiate level. Ton of research on this. Build positive relationships. So if your students feel that they are building positive relationships with you, they are more likely to come to you and tell you what they need. This is something that we are working on with our QEP. We are meeting with them in the beginning of the course, because the research says if you can get them to come to you in the beginning, especially with certain groups, if they come to you, if we can meet with them at the beginning of the course, they are more likely to come to you throughout the semester if they need help. But we do need to do that earlier. Consider exceptions for attendance at the, in our classrooms and the collegiate levels. If you, I attended an Achieving the Dream conference, and the speaker said, if a student comes to you who's living in an area where there's a lot of stuff going on, are you willing to listen to that student who says, hey, there was a shootout last night in my neighborhood and I didn't finish my essay. Are you going to say to me, I'm sorry, you knew what the due date was? Or are you going to have some compassion? All right. Wraparound services are extremely important. Most colleges and universities are working on the wraparound services now, so that's important. Remember possible difficulties, balancing on responsibilities. I just talked about that with my professor who told me, you can't do student teaching and work. All right. Make sure students have access to everything to make them successful. And then at the collegiate level, provide opportunities for K-12 partnerships. That's where it comes in. Before students get to college, making sure we're reaching out to students before they get here so that they have the language, so that they have access to colleges, so that they're programmed so that they can come on site. And so those, I think, are extremely important. And then these are all the wraparound services: food pantries, childcare, transportation, all these kinds of things. These are textbooks, all of these are wraparound services. And this is one that's come up recently, virtual internships especially for our adult learners who are having to work. And then finally, with the state and federal, making sure all students across each state and across the country have access, reliable access. We still have students in our 4 county area who do not have that. So that is something that we're working on as well. Provide colleges with funds to assist with childcare. Provide colleges with career centers that help parents. Provide financial support for programs that focus on opportunity gaps. And ensure, this is important to us, especially me, ensure equal pay for all demographics. And so I think if we can take all of these recommendations, especially number 1, those positive relationships, number 2, reaching out to students before they get to college, and then making sure once they get here that they have the support that they need so that they don't feel like they need to quit like I did. I think we can have a successful group of first generation students. So do we have any questions or comments? And we have a few minutes for comments or questions that I would love to be able to answer.
Hi,
Okay.
Frankie. The main question that came in was just how do we best support them? But I think Marion posted that right before you got to the last slide with all of the activities and actions. I wonder if you might go back to that slide.
Okay.
And tell us how you do that at your institution.
Okay, I do have some examples.
Okay, that might be helpful because those are big picture things and some people like, oh my gosh, how do I do it? But tell us how you do those things.
Okay, so I have some great examples. So one of the things that we're doing to reach out to our K-12 partners, we have STEM programs where we are bringing in middle schoolers for robotics, for some of our medical programs, some of the biology programs to get these students in. And especially now we're trying to make sure not only that young men are applying for these and attending these, or making sure that we are reaching out to our young girls in the area as well. The other thing that we're doing, we have an area in Henderson. There are a lot of gangs. And so there's a program in Henderson that's working with gangs and young males there. And so we have tapped into that program where we can get those students and hopefully bring them into the college, and most of them are first generation students, and give them the services that they need as first generation students. The wraparound services are extremely important, so that they can get any kind of credential that they need to be successful. What are some of the other ones? Cards. Oh, cards. The other thing, because of poverty in this area, transportation is an issue for a lot of our students. And so our president has decided that she will provide transportation for our students in the 4 county areas. So as long as you live in one of the 4 county areas, she will make sure that you get picked up from your home and taken to any of the 4 county sites and get to your classes and get back home. So that really is extremely important.
And of course, I mentioned the food pantry.
Oh, and the food pantry. Yeah, we do have food pantries. Oh gosh, the North Carolina Food Pantry reached out to us, and so we now have a huge food pantry. We actually have 2 on 2 different sites, but our main campus has, meats and vegetables and all kinds of things. We also have a clothing pantry, and one of them focuses on clothing for when students graduate, that they have the clothes appropriate to go out and do interviews. And so all of those are extremely important.
It also brings up for me, Frankie, and I'm sure other folks may feel this way too, that one of the best things an institution could do, whatever those services are, is let all faculty know what they are.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the semester, during the semester, and help and support faculty to know how students access those, and to constantly be sharing it and normalize it in their classrooms.
Right. One of the things we're doing with Achieving the Dream is that they have recommended that we even include this information on our syllabi. And so we are going to do that as well and put it on Moodle. We're going to make this more visible. The other thing that's important too, and this is kind of not related to the subject, but we're making those food and clothing and all those options available to our faculty and staff. So
yeah. Are there any other final questions? Sarah has one. Flexible due dates. She's always been flexible, but especially so, and vocal about it since COVID, particularly, right? Hello.
Right.
But often wonder if this is giving students too much leeway in avoiding completion of assignments. It's a tricky balance. Any comments on that?
Right. So Sarah is a colleague. So, but yeah, so we are focusing a lot on equity here at Vance-Granville. And so, hi Sarah. So we have been really taking the opportunity to get, and this is where the relationship comes into play, building those relationships so that when those students come to us, we get to know the individual need of the student. And so when that student says to us, I really need this, and that's the most important thing. You have to build those relationships because it's not a one size fits all. And so if I had a student come to me and he hadn't had gas to get to class, and so we were able to get him the carts, and then the carts actually, the transportation that's been so popular that we got him a gas card. So
okay, I think we'll wrap up. I wanted to thank you so much to all the participants. I really appreciate also, Frankie, academics don't often go to professional development where people sort of share and disclose about their background. And so I personally found that really refreshing. A lot of people put that in the chat as well. And bringing up the issue of how, as instructors and student support folks, we connect to our students regardless of what our background is. For example, someone like me, I grew up in a middle-class family, and I think it's just as important for me to tell my students that, so that, because as I noted in there, students know when people have privilege, whatever that is. So if you're not identifying it, they're like, hey, I know you're a little different than I am, and that kind of thing. So I really, really appreciate your presentation. And by the way, your technology was great. You're
thank you, Jason.
People particularly love the sharing of the pictures. So I wanted to remind all the participants that this is what's called room C for day one. And there isn't another session in this room, I believe, room C, until it starts at 10. So if you're looking for sessions that start at 9, you'll want to leave this Zoom, go back to the online resource and click into room A. And again, thank you participants for coming. Thank you, Frankie. And Frankie, I just wanted to make sure you're okay that we close caption this and share the recording.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.